On the right-hand side of the top line is the sensor status. This will indicate your signal quality. If all sensors are producing good signals, the display will read, "Sensors OK." If there is a problem with one or more sensors, the message will be "Fail," "Drift," or "Noise," followed by the affected sensor. The bottom line of the screen shows selections that may be made by pressing the key just beneath the desired selection. Moving from left to right, if you press the key under PAT, you will enter the menu that allows entry of patient information, such as ID, name, age, etc. Selecting Edit will allow you to change patient information either before or after acquiring the ECG. By pressing the key under AMP, you will be able to temporarily change the paper speed, gain, or artifact filter settings. These settings will revert to your selected power-up defaults when the LE2 is powered down. If your LE2 came with exercise stress testing capabilities, there will be a selection on the screen that says XTOL. Pressing the key under this selection allows you to enter the stress testing mode. For further instructions regarding this function, you will need to refer to the XTOL operator's manual. By pressing the key under Page, you will access the Page menu, which allows you to load paper, advance paper, or reverse the paper. Press the Page key now. Press the Load key. The paper will advance one full page. Use this when loading paper. Pressing forward or reverse will move the paper only slightly. Press the key under the return arrow to return to the initial menu. Now press the key under Setup to enter the Setup menu. Notice the three arrows on the right side of the screen. The up and down arrows will enable you to scroll through the menu selections. The return arrow always takes you back to the previous menu. Press the key under the up arrow to bring up the System Setup menu. Now press any key under the words System Setup to enter the menu. The first item will be the setting for line filter, which filters out electrical interference from AC line voltage. The choices are off, 50 Hz, and 60 Hz. Select 60 Hz for units that operate on 115 volt AC power, which is standard for the United States. Scroll through the choices by using the soft function keys under the right and left arrows on the left side of the screen. Once you have made your selection, arrow down to bring up the date format selections. Again, use the right and left arrow keys to scroll through the selections of month, day, year, day, month, year, or year, month, day. Make your selection and down arrow to bring up the current date. If it needs to be reset, backspace to delete the current setting. Then enter the correct date. Now, arrow down to bring up the current time. Check to make sure the time is correct. If incorrect, it can be changed in the same manner as changing the date. Now, bring up language selection. After verifying that the correct language is selected, proceed to the height units selection. The choices are centimeters and inches. Now, arrow down to the weight unit selection. Your choices here are pounds and kilograms. Next, proceed to the institution name field. You can type in the name of your institution here and it will be printed across the bottom of each ECG. Otherwise, leave it blank and there will be nothing printed in this space. Next, arrow down to the password on-off feature. If you do not want to enter a password each time you change settings on the LE2, leave this feature turned to off. Now, use the return arrow key to return to the Setup menu screen. arrow down to bring up the Print Setup Report selection. By pressing any of the keys under Print Setup Report, you will obtain a printout of all your current settings. Now, scroll to the Power Up Default menu. By accessing this menu, you will be able to change the paper speed, gain, and filter settings. Now, arrow down to the next menu, which is Auto ECG Setup. Press any key directly beneath Auto ECG Setup to enter this menu. The first selection will allow you to set up your 12-lead ECG format. This refers to the way in which the 12 leads are printed out on the paper. There are 10 format choices, and samples of these formats are located in the LE2 Operator's Manual. The factory setting is Standard 4-channel. This will give you 3 lines of 12-lead data and a 10-second rhythm strip of your choice as the 4th line. If you have no preference, select Standard 4-channel. If you select a format that includes rhythm channels, you must select the leads to be used for each of these channels. Scroll down to Rhythm Lead Channel 1. If you have no preference, select Lead 2 as your rhythm lead. Now, move to Rhythm Lead Channel 2. Make a selection or leave at the factory setting of AVF. Arrow down to Rhythm Lead Channel 3. Again, make a selection or leave at the factory setting of V5. Now, arrow down to the Rhythm Page menu. The rhythm page is a full page containing 10 seconds of selected leads. If you do not wish to have a full page of rhythm strips with each ECG, select Off. Press the arrow down key. If your LE2 is an interpretive model, the Analysis Original menu will appear. Choose between Off, which turns the interpretation off, On without reasons, which prints the analysis statements but not the reason statements, or On with reasons, which enables printing of the analysis statements and the supporting reason statements. If you have no preference, choose On with reasons. Now, arrow down to bring up the Analysis Copies selection. If you will be printing extra copies when you do an ECG, you may choose whether or not to have the interpretation printed on the copies. Arrow down to bring up the Number of Copies selection. Enter a number from 0 to 5 to obtain 0 to 5 copies of each ECG acquired. Scroll down to the Median Complex Page selection. The standard setting for this selection is Off. This completes Auto ECG Setup. Use the return arrow to return to the top of the Setup menu. Now arrow down to enter the Custom Lead 1 menu. Custom Lead 1 and Custom Lead 2 are groups of leads that you can pre-select for manual rhythm printouts. You will need to select the leads that you want for each channel. The most common setting for Custom Lead 1 is Standard 3-channel, with Channel 1 set to Lead 2, Channel 2 set to Lead AVF, and Channel 3 set to Lead V5. Once you have made your selections for Custom Lead 1, use the return arrow to return to the top of the Custom Lead 1 Setup menu. Now, arrow down to the Custom Lead 2 Setup menu. Make your lead selections for each channel and then use the return arrow to go back to the top of the menu. Now, arrow down to bring up the Miscellaneous menu. To enter the menu, press any key directly under the word Miscellaneous. Your first selection is Baseline Filter. The choices are stable baseline filter or 0.05. The recommended setting is stable baseline filter. Next, scroll down to the pacer enhancement selection. Your choices are on or off. By selecting on, pacemaker spikes will be amplified to at least 10 millimeters tall with a positive deflection. Now, arrow down to the Rhythm Mode Pages selection. If you have turned the rhythm page on in the Auto ECG setup, you can now select the number of rhythm pages that will be printed. The factory setting is 1 page. Arrow down to the bradycardia limit selection. The factory setting is 60 beats per minute. Reports for adult patients with heart rates below this limit are labeled as bradycardia. The limit can be set to between 41 and 69. Now, arrow down to the tachycardia limit selection. Reports for adult patients with heart rates above this limit will be labeled as tachycardia. The factory setting is 100. The limit can be set to between 81 and 129. Press the return arrow to return to the top of the miscellaneous setup menu. Arrow down to the final user setup menu, which is Patient Fields Enable. In this list of selections, you will determine which patient demographic fields are used. For instance, if you wish to routinely enter only the patient's ID number, name, and age on each ECG, you will turn these fields on and all others off. Once you have decided on which patient information you would like to include in your ECGs, you will need to scroll through the list of fields, turning them on or off according to your preferences. Some fields will offer the choices of On Clear and On Hold. Select On Hold if you want every patient file to have the same information in this field. For example, you may want every patient record to be labeled with the same department name. Selecting On Clear will enable the field, but allow you to make a different entry for each patient. To enter the menu, press any key directly under Patient Fields Enable. Scroll through the list of fields and enter your selections. After you have set all the patient fields, press the return arrow key twice to return to the initial menu. You are now ready to acquire an ECG using your own customized settings. To summarize, 1. To quickly acquire a STAT ECG, just follow the instructions printed on the paper door of the Eclipse LE2. 2. It is very important to consistently use good